Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, today in the news, another mass shooting, this time in Charleston, South Carolina, that left 9 people dead. Now, we'll look at that story along with evidence that the drought that we talk so much about is certainly not over, as the water scarcity actually continues to climb. But first, we're going to look at some of the nation's preparations for war and the unresolved conflicts. Well, trouble is brewing in the South China Sea as the U.S. disputes China's man-made islands. Now, Chinese military views these man-made islands as sovereign territory, but the U.S. says they are in international waters hundreds of miles from China's mainland. Now, the United States has been spying on China's actions with the P-88 Poseidon, America's most advanced surveillance and sub-hunting aircraft.
Kind of the latest on the market there, huh? Well, China has recently been building its military might with the sailing of its first aircraft carrier, equipping its nuclear missiles with multiple warheads, and developing missiles to destroy U.S. aircraft carriers. China is now building military bases far from its shores.
In response, the United States is making bold moves of its own by sending surveillance planes to check out the new islands and may soon decide to sail warships close by as well. Will China get the message? Well, over the past 2 years, they've expanded the islands by 2,000 acres in waters as deep as 300 feet with dredgers that pump sand out onto the floor, the base of these man-made islands. They're doing this all the time to increase the size.
Well, that's some ingenuity right there. Well, this is definitely truly an engineering marvel, complete with early radar, an airport tower, runway long enough to handle every aircraft in the Chinese military. The islands receive multiple dredgers and cargo ships daily. Now, having roads busy with truck traffic and barracks for its inhabitants, these islands are being called China's unsinkable aircraft carriers.
Well, these islands are constantly heavily protected by Chinese warships and Coast Guard. Now, as the U.S. spy planes fly overhead, the Chinese Navy calls out warnings for them to please go away quickly, repeating, "This is the Chinese Navy. You are approaching our military alert zone. Leave immediately."
Well, Kim Jong-un makes a new blatant and aggressive threat, stating his forces will open fire on any South Korean ships moving into what he sees are North Korean waters. South Korea is angrily vowing retaliation, and threats like this from Pyongyang have kept America from being able to negotiate over Kim's nuclear weapons program. It's like it's trying to do, of course, with Iran.
In a CNN interview, former UN weapons inspector David Albright says North Korea has been greatly expanding its ability to make the nuclear explosive materials that it needs to make nuclear weapons. Now, in 2 years, Kim Jong-un's government has doubled the size of the enrichment plant at Yongbyon. Now, this is where the experts say North Korea enriches the uranium for those nuclear bombs.
Right. Along with building its nuclear program, North Korea has also been shopping overseas to get the equipment that they need in order to build up their nuclear arsenal. White House and State Department officials are open to dialogue with Kim's government in hopes of downsizing Kim's nuclear weapons. However, North Korea would have to show a commitment, which it hasn't as of yet.
U.S. Korea analyst Joe Witt said, "I think we have rapidly approached the point of no return over the past 5 years. Now, this program has gained a lot of momentum over the past few years, and not much has been done to stop it. Analysts also believe Kim's military may be able to fit nuclear warheads on the missiles that are capable of hitting both South Korea and Japan.
Of course, U.S. allies. Well, California's water shortage is forcing state officials to find new ways to conserve its resources. One community called Mountain House is just days away from having no water at all as the state cut off its only water source. Despite Mountain House being one of the senior water rights holders, the state has now targeted this area as part of its tougher set of rules.
Political analyst Joe Lestingi, commenting on California's water situation, said, "This is tragic. This is terrible. It's gotten down to this level. The water situation out there is really bad. This drought is much worse than I think most people think it is." Lestingi also cited a story from the Washington Post that reported how the aquifers underneath California are also starting to dry up.
Well, political analyst Ashley says that many believe that future wars in the Middle East and around the world, well, they're not going to be for oil, they're going to be for water. And the point that I want to reiterate, she says here, is above anything is that while the spotlight's on California today, it's not a matter of if, but when this is an issue for everyone else. And this is something we really need to be thinking about as a group, not just state by state.
Well, Katana, interesting fact about the actual development of nuclear weapons is that they take a lot of water in order to produce them.
That's right.
Well, our field correspondent Larry McGee has our story on how the Earth's water supply is drying up and how the amounts that remain are increasingly becoming hazardous to human health. Larry, where does this story begin?
In California, of all places, the state that up until now had been responsible for furnishing up to 50% of America's fruits and nuts. It is now going dry at a breakneck pace, and state officials have been groping to find a solution to address the crisis. Their latest move involved completely cutting off the Californian community of Mountain House. While the community is a senior water rights holder in Sacramento, it has obviously had those rights overridden by the state and is now days away from being completely without water. With the aquifers underneath California drying up, experts say the crisis in Cali is much bigger than most people realize. Moreover, additional input by analysts suggests that the environmental emergency being witnessed in California is actually a representation of what is taking place across the globe, with the nations of the Tigris and Euphrates region being most heavily affected. According to reports, water is becoming the new oil, and as such, it will play an increasing role in the world's many conflicts. With the firmament no longer yielding rain as it used to, millions of people have become dependent on groundwater stored in the Earth's aquifers in order to survive. Newly released reports indicate that those aquifers are fading away, with 21 of the 37 largest aquifers being depleted faster than they are being replenished. NASA scientist and professor Jay Famagletti, an author of one of the papers, sat down with reporters this week to discuss the details. What scientists have reportedly found is that of the 21 aquifers which have been weakened, 13 are on the verge of completely dying. When questioned as to the why, Professor Famagletti says we rely heavily on groundwater for personal and agricultural use, but in terms of management, we have not done a very great job, and that is true for the United States as well as the rest of the globe. In areas such as California, 500 trillion gallons of groundwater have been lost per year for the last 4 years of its drought, but with no snow on its mountains, very little water in its reserves, and no rainfall, California, like many other nations throughout the world, feels helpless to do anything outside of draw from its groundwater. But that option too now is very rapidly drying up. That, of course, can set the stage for conflict, and the United States intelligence reports are suggesting as much, saying that in less than 10 years, water stress could become a weapon and a major cause for warfare among the nations of the Tigris and Euphrates region. Amid all of the uproar and scarcity, Corporations, however, are seeing an opportunity for profit. And according to reports, the corporate race to acquire ownership of water has begun, aided by organizations such as World Bank, who often impose privatization of a country's water supply as a stipulation for receiving a loan. According to the Center for Public Integrity, corporations can net as much as $1 trillion from privatizing, purifying, and distributing water in the Middle East and Northern Africa, where the price of water is often greater than that of oil. Amount isn't the only concern regarding water, however. Cleanliness is also an issue, as even the sum of water left for human usage is increasingly being implicated in producing sickness. Horseshoe Lake in Washington is the latest such example, after 200 swimmers became ill after swimming in the lake. The microbial culprit behind the outbreak is still unidentified, but officials have reportedly ruled out E. coli and are considering a norovirus as a possible suspect. As a consolation, health officials say that there are measures which can be taken by families to protect themselves if they choose a lake for swimming. Never go in if it's overcrowded. When you get out, wash your hands. And never drink the water. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Interesting, Katan, that you can swim in the water. All you got to do is wash your hands and nothing to worry about.
Yeah, don't know what you're going to do with the rest of the body. Well, water isn't the only thing that's suffering. Society continues to bear the burden of violence and death daily. This latest occurrence in South Carolina. Dylan Roof, the suspect in the shooting death of 9 people while they attended a Wednesday evening church service, is currently behind bars in solitary confinement and on a suicide watch.
At a hearing, he stood emotionless as he was charged with 9 counts of murder after he gunned down 3 men and 6 women. Around 8 p.m., Roof entered the Emmanuel AME Church and attended a Bible study class there for about an hour, after which he stood up and pulled out a handgun and began shooting. Now that, according to court documents, all of the 9 victims were shot multiple times.
Well, documents also show that before he left the building, he stood over a witness and uttered a racially inflammatory statement. He also told a witness that he had spared her life so she could tell others. And in addition to her, a woman and a 5-year-old boy also survived by playing dead. The mayor of Charleston, Joseph Riley, said, "I knew most of these people. I admired them, I loved them, and I worked with them. So it's the hardest thing that I've ever done in this job, and probably the hardest thing that I'll do in my life."
Now, Roof evaded capture for more than 12 hours. His father recognized him from a surveillance still shot that was posted and contacted Charleston police. Now, he also told authorities that his son owned a .45 caliber handgun. Now, Roof was arrested in Shelby, and authorities found a Glock 41, a .45 caliber handgun, in his car. He was arrested there and taken to the Shelby police station.
According to law enforcement, Roof confessed planning the attack for some time and that he chose the church because it was a historic African-American church. Sources revealed that he said while he was in the Bible study, he actually considered abandoning the plan. But of course, he changed his mind because he thought if he didn't do it, well, no one else would.
If convicted, Roof could get the death penalty, and the Department of Justice is investigating this crime as both a hate crime and an act of domestic terrorism.
Well, it's real to the mind, but it's not really real. We're talking about virtual reality. Facebook has Oculus, and Google has a device called Cardboard. Both of these forms of virtual reality devices are seen to have potential for entertainment and educational purposes.
Jeremy Bailenson sees potential that's a bit worrisome. His Stanford University lab is studying the effects of virtual reality in the real world for both adults and children. In fact, Bailenson says that if you take an elementary child and you bring them to the lab and give them a virtual experience, a week later when you bring them back, 50% of them will believe that the prior virtual experience happened in real world.
Wow. His lab has partnered with Sesame Street to explore what effects virtual reality has on a 5-year-old and how it affects their perceptual system. Concerning how distracting virtual reality is, Bailenson said, when people put on the virtual reality helmet, the brain treats it as real. He said this is called psychological presence, and it is experienced by things seen while in the virtual reality world. Things like sweaty palms, the heart racing, etc. They take place because the brain, of course, treats these events as real, and so it creates a psychological response, physiological response in the body.
Well, lastly, the Pope's recent encyclical that was released June 18th was met with praise by many. In fact, climate scientists praise the Pope's combination of scientific knowledge with religious values. John Schelnober said, "One message comes from reasoning, from ingenuity, from technology and progress, while the other comes from faith, ethical values, Christianity."
Around the world, and even in the Philippines, people are listening, and we're listening with anticipation. A Philippine environmentalist, Rodney Gallica, said, "The Pope cannot solve the climate crisis alone. His encyclical will be a force to unite people of the world." Also, a UN statistician said that the Pope has taken the right steps to take a holistic view of environmental problems and their solutions.
Now, in the U.S., the House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said concerning the letter, "We really must listen to His Holiness as we go forward." Now, but the Republican leader stopped short of endorsing the encyclical. Representative John Boehner said, "This Pope is not afraid to challenge everyone's thinking on issues practically one way or another."
Well, the earth is definitely warming up, the water is definitely drying up, and mankind's love is pretty much almost at a point of zero. Well, Yisrael Hawkins and the House of Yahweh is bringing forth the Holy Scriptures that show mankind how to turn their life around from this dark spiral that they have been descending on for a very long time now. If you'd like to know what you can do to save yourself and your family, contact the House of Yahweh for the only source of light and the only place that has the true waters of life.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. Now, you can also check out our new website at www.ypnnews.com. And to email the House of Yahweh, send your emails to info@yahweh.com. And for any calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Well, up next, the only one authorized to bring forth the message of peace and the solution to all your problems, Yisrael Hawkins. For YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.